All right, well, it's great to be here with you guys. My name's Evan Courtney, one of the pastors here, and we're glad you're able to join us. We do want to let you know, next week we're starting a new teaching series that's called Squeezed, and that'll be 4 weeks long as we dive into specific topics about where kind of in your life you're getting wrung out, where you're kind of, there's stress, where you're getting squeezed, where you're feeling pressure. I know in our own life, like we have that with, in family and marriage and with kids and with finances and with schedules. Like everything is coming at us and pushing stress up against us, and we're kind of getting wrung out. And I don't know if that's where you're at, but the next 4 weeks we're going to talk about what does God want to do with those things? How can He relieve stress from that? And so when you leave today, we've actually got invite cards for you that is a great opportunity for you to invite your friends, your coworkers, your neighbors to let them know about Squeeze, that it's a great opportunity, good topics for them. We've got a quick video that talks a little bit more about it. So that's Squeezed, isn't it? I'm just like waiting for the moment for those things to burst. So we'd love for you to join us next week. But today we're actually going to be finishing up our series of Forged. And in Charleston, we are so glad to have you guys join us today. Can we give a hand clap for Charleston and all of those that are joining us? We're pumped because this whole summer, you may not have known, but we've gone through the entire book of Mark, all 16 chapters of Mark, and we started a couple months ago with a series called Marvel, and we looked at the beginning of Mark, and then we transitioned into a different series, this one that we're in now called Forged, and we're completing the entire chapter of Mark as we have spoke through every single verse in Mark. And so today what we're doing is, it's like the end of the story is like the pinnacle, and it's starting to reveal and pull back like what was this whole thing about. It's like, think of your favorite story, your favorite book, your favorite movie. It's like the aha moment. You're like the hour and a half of the movie, and then it's the last 30 seconds. Like, oh, I didn't know this. It's like Scooby-Doo, right? So at the end of Scooby-Doo, what happens? It's the same ending every single time. They take the mask off, like, oh, it's Mr. Carper from down the street, right? And so that's the aha moment. And so we're going to see the aha, like what's the whole point of Jesus' life is getting summarized today. It's revealed, and the aha moment is here. And before we dive into that, I got a couple other ahas from some movies I'd like you to see.
He's a silent guardian, a watchful protector, a dark knight.
Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
The truth is, I am Iron Man.
Oh, Annie M. There's no place like home.
So long, partner.
This is my gift, my curse. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Yo, Adrian, we did it.
A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible. Where we go from there is a choice I leave to you.
So halfway through that was playing, I was like, we just spoiled 15 movies. So hopefully those are old enough movies. Like if you haven't seen them yet, that's your own fault. You just saw all the endings to all of those movies. But that's what we're doing here is today we're kind of revealing, like we're showing you like what's the pinnacle, what's the whole purpose of this story that we've been sharing all summer long. And so for the last couple weeks, Pastor Travis has been talking about and like kind of outlining the end of Jesus' life. And he talks about that Jesus is killed, and we talked about the crucifixion, and then we talked about the resurrection of him coming back to life. And now he's spending about 40 days on earth after he came back to life. And that's where we're diving in today. So it's kind of his last words before he leaves again. It's the last chapter. And if somebody is ever going to tell you their last words, or if you've been in the company of somebody that's passing away, like you're hanging on to every moment. You're trying to listen into every single thing. Whatever the last thing is, like you're paying attention to that. And I know even like for my own son, and we have every season that we start a new baseball season, it's like the last words I give him before he goes out onto the field is, usually the most important thing I want him to know. And a lot of times it's not like, hey, make sure when you throw, you follow up. No, it's like, hey, I love you, or hey, like you can do all things. So it's some kind of, what are the last words? And so that's where his followers are kind of hanging on the last words. And that's where I want you today. It's like, what are those last words? The last words that Jesus is saying to us are his most important words that he's ever said, the final words. And so today, that's what we're doing. And I know as he shares his final words that the Bible calls it the Great Commission, of him sending out his followers and saying, this is what I want my followers to do, and to take what I've done here and to spread it to everybody around the world. And if you're like me, when I kind of read that, and we'll go through it today, a lot of times I feel guilty, like, man, I'm not doing enough, or there's shame of I need to be telling more people, or maybe the other side of, yeah, but if I tell people and they deny it, or they deny me, and I don't want to see failure. And so those are kind of wrestling inside of me, and you might feel those same things of hey, I'm not sharing enough, or I don't know how to share, or kind of there's these stumbling blocks. And so today we're going to dive into what Mark says and kind of lay out get rid of some of those stumbling blocks for you, and actually what it means to do this great commission that he says, this is what I want all of his followers to do. And so we're going to dive in. It's Mark chapter 16. And it says this: after Jesus rose from the dead early on Sunday morning, the first person who saw him was Mary Magdalene, the woman from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went to the disciples, so she went to his followers, who were grieving and weeping, and told them what had happened. But when she told them that Jesus was alive and she had seen him, they did not believe her. And so what we're going to read here in Mark is that Jesus is appearing, and Mark writes out 3 different appearances that he has to people at this time of him coming back. And what you're seeing is there's like this unbelief of the people that are following Jesus that he's actually came back to life. And it continues on to this in the verse 12. It says, afterward he appeared in a different form. Now, I'm not sure what that means. I don't know what the first form was, and I'm not sure what the different form is. If he's in a different body, I don't know. The different body, I don't know. To 2 of his followers who are walking from Jerusalem into the country. They rushed back to tell the others, but no one believed them. And then he continues. Still later, he appeared to 11 disciples as they were eating together. It says he rebuked them for their stubbornness, their unbelief, because they refused to believe those who had seen him after he had been raised from the dead. So there's kind of this unbelief, and his followers are dealing with a little bit of kind of figuring out in their own heart of what's going on as Jesus is walking around Jerusalem, and they kind of got this attitude of like, yeah, right, like that's not really him, because we saw what happened to him, and what happened to him nobody is ever going to recover from. Like, we saw him on the cross. Like, we saw him take his last breath. We saw them beat him. We saw him hang on the cross. There's no way he's back from that. And so they just didn't believe. They had kind of this hardness in their heart because they thought that they had this Savior. And they thought he was going to do things one way, and he did things a different way. And they kind of had this hardness that happened in their heart. But it says that they refused to believe. And so what we have to have in our own life is we have to have a time or a moment that we believe. There has to be some time that we can nail down to say, you know what, there was a time before I didn't believe, and now I do believe. A time that you say, you know what, I believe, and I'm going to follow Jesus for the rest of my life. Somebody has told me the message, I've heard the message, and today I'm going to believe. And so all of us have to have that moment of where we say, you know what, I am going to believe. And that's what we have to have. And that when we say yes to following him, what happens is he transforms our life forever. And so now what we've got in this situation that we're going to read in this next verse is that him and all of his disciples are sitting down together, and he starts off with correcting them. And then he begins to talk about their unbelief. And we're getting to the pinnacle point of his final words, his final statements, kind of this final countdown. And so Mark, the 15th verse says it. It says, then he tells them this. He says, then he told them, go into all the world and preach the good news to everyone. He says, anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved, but anyone who refuses to believe will be condemned. And so there's a lot in this verse, and what I want to do is kind of look at the last verse, verse 16, and we'll flip back to 15. So to kind of do it in reverse, is he's saying this, he's saying, but anyone who refuses to believe will be condemned. And that's why all of us have to have some point, some moment in our life where we're having to believe. We're having to say, you know what, Jesus, I want to follow you with everything that I believe that you came to this earth for me. Because what happens if we don't, and the word is condemned, which means there's this separation or there's this punishment. And so a separation from God or a punishment from God is, we believe, it's eternity in hell. And so since you chose, or since people chose not to accept the free gift of salvation of what Jesus did on the cross for your sins, to forgive you of your sins, since you didn't receive him forgiving you of your sins, you have to pay for your sins, pay for you going against him on your own. And so the way that you pay for that on your own is being eternally separated from God, which is hell. And so if you say in your life, God, I don't need you, I can do this on my own, in eternity, guess what? You don't need him, so you'll be on your own, which is eternity in hell. And so the question is today is, do you believe? Have you ever believed? Have you made that statement to say, you know what, I need to follow you, I'm going to believe in you? Because if you don't believe, you'll be condemned, which is that separation. And the thing is that we read, or that we sang this morning, is that he doesn't want this for us. We choose that for ourselves. What he wants for us, and what we sang about today, is about a loving God that is pursuing us, that wants a relationship with us. He doesn't want us to be condemned. He's pursuing us because he sent his son to die on the cross for us, which Pastor talked about a couple weeks ago. He sent his son to die on the cross because he loves us so much, because he loves you so much that he says, you know what, I know you've made mistakes. I get it, and because of that, I want to pay. I want to be punished for you instead of you. And so what you have to do is to say, you know what, I believe that you did that for me. Forgive me. Thank you for dying for me. And so our job is to believe that he died for us and to accept this free grace, to accept this forgiveness of our sins. And when we believe, we're not separated. When we believe, we're not punished. And so that's what Jesus is explaining to them. So if we go before it, it says, go back, I confused you. There you go. Anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved. And so the thing that saves us is a belief, not baptism. You might have thought that they were both combined together and you had to have both of them to be saved, but that's not what this says here. It says anyone who believes and is baptized is saved or is forgiven, but anyone who refuses to believe will be punished. It doesn't say anyone who refuses to believe and isn't baptized will be punished. So there's a difference here. And so you may have thought that they were tied together, but they aren't. So anyone that believes and is baptized is saved, but anyone who refuses to believe is condemned. And the way that you know that you have legitimate faith in Jesus is that you obey him. So if you're wondering today, Evan, I don't know if I believe, you could answer it this way. Do you obey? Do you obey what he says? And so this says, it tells you exactly the first thing that you should do when you believe, the first commandment, the first thing that you can do to obey him is to get baptized. Because it says anyone who believes and is baptized, that's your first step. Once you believe, guess what the first thing you're supposed to do? Is to get baptized. So to know whether or not you believe is, have you taken that first step of being baptized? And baptized is simply an indication of saying, I have faith, I believe. And so baptism immediately follows salvation. They go hand in hand. And so you have to kind of look in yourself and think, hey, am I following the first thing that he's commanded us to? If you've not been baptized, get baptized. That's what he's commanding us to do. And today, if you're interested in that, on your info card, you can just write down, or the fields.guide, just comment and say, I want to get water baptized. So that's what he's saying here about, man, if your first step is to get baptized if you believe. So let's go back to verse 15. And so he says this before about the believing. He says, go into all the world and preach the good news. So this is the Great Commission. So he says, go into all the world and preach, or to tell others, communicate to others, using your words, using your actions, using your motives, using your heart, using your finances, using your resources, to tell people about the good news. What good news? The good news that we just talked about, that Jesus came to die for their sins, that he wants to give them a free gift. Go where? Where am I supposed to go? We're supposed to go everywhere. Go to our family, go to our neighbor, go to our city, go to our country, go to our world. He's just saying, I just want you to go. Like a lot of times we're just stuck, like just go. I think the whole Bible, the 66 books, the thousands of pages written over hundreds of years, I think it can all be summed up with 2 letters into one word, the word go. Like that's it. That's the whole purpose of Jesus' life, the whole purpose of the Bible. I just spoiled the whole thing for you. Right? Now you can say, I don't have to read it. I just read the 2 letters into one word. And if you figure that out, then you figured out God. What does he want us to do? He wants us to go. That's it. That's the whole thing. There's no hidden agenda. It's not complicated. We've overcomplicated. We just have to do one thing. It's to go. To go everywhere, to go to every person, to go to every part of the world. That's what we have to do, is to go. I like another version of this. Somebody else, a different writer, says, go into all the world and proclaim. It doesn't say preach, it says proclaim. Because a lot of times we think preach is the person that stands on the stage and talks to the people up in the crowd. And so I think the better word is the proclaim word. And what proclaim means, it means back in their time when Mark was writing this, they had what they called was a town crier or a town watchman. And so what they would do is they would proclaim. They would proclaim things to this town. And so think of it this way, like they didn't have any communication tools that we have today. They don't have, loudspeakers, they don't have phones, they don't have internet, they don't have any of that. So think about, how do they communicate if an enemy is coming in to take over them? Like they didn't know ahead of time, and so they would have somebody that was this town crier, this watchman, that would watch and look to see if anybody was coming. And if somebody was coming, the enemy was coming, this town crier's job was to proclaim throughout the town, the enemy is coming, the enemy is coming, get ready, the enemy is coming, and the enemy is here, and running all throughout the town or all throughout the village, crying that the enemy was coming so that everybody could get prepared. That was the town crier. What was he doing? He was proclaiming that the enemy was coming. The town crier didn't worry about if somebody didn't communicate it in the way that they wanted to, or like, hey, you're a little bit loud. Can you say that a little bit softer? No, like he didn't care about anybody's feelings. Why? He wanted them to know that the enemy was coming. So the same thing when the king from the kingdom would arrive, he would be looking, or she would be looking, and the watchman would be looking out, and they would see the king coming. And guess what it was their job to do? Is to proclaim to the village that the king was coming. The king was coming. Let's get ready. The king is coming. The king is coming. Guess what your job is to do? You guys, we are supposed to proclaim. We are supposed to tell others that, hey, there is this good news. Hey, what you're doing, the way your life is going, you don't have to live that way. You don't have to live with guilt and shame. Guess what? There's a new way to live. Your job is to be the watchman, the town crier, to proclaim to other people. That's what our job is. And a lot of times what we do is we have the tendency to evaluate how somebody is going to respond to us proclaiming. So our coworker, our family member, we evaluate, hey, you know what, I shouldn't encourage them or tell them about my story or proclaim to them about the truth or let them know about this gift of salvation because I'm really nervous about how they're going to take it and how they're going to react or where they are in their life. No. Our job isn't to evaluate how they're going to respond. It doesn't say, go into all the world and proclaim, but before you do, evaluate. No, it doesn't say that, right? Your job isn't to evaluate. Our job is to go. And so we go because we never know what God is doing in the hearts of people. We never know. Maybe they needed something that you were going to share. You don't know. We don't know what's happening in the hearts of somebody else. And so what do? He says, go. Just proclaim. There's nothing wrong with proclaiming. Don't worry about evaluating. Just proclaim. And so our number one goal, the whole reason that we were created, the number one goal is this. Like you don't have to, like you can throw out all the self-help books or trying to figure out your goals in life and the meaning of life because I'm going to spoil it for you, okay? Your goal, number one, is to know God. Okay? That's the whole meaning of your life is to know God. So once you know God and you believe, guess what? Your number one goal changes. Now guess what your number two goal is? Your number one goal is, it's a new goal, is to serve God. That's your new goal. So if you believe and you say, you know what, Evan, I know God, great. Your new goal, serve God. Well, how do you serve God? One of the ways that you serve God is by going, is by telling the truth, is by proclaiming it. And so as a church and a staff here, like we have several goals that we're going after them. And one of the goals that we have is a numerical goal. So everybody that walks into this building today, we count. Every kid that comes, we count. And by the end of today, I'll know how many people are in this building today, how many people are in Charleston, how many that totals. I know how many people were for last week. I know how many people were from the week before. I know the percentage difference between this year and last year and the year before that. And I kind of got a figuration. I can kind of configure and calculate how many people are going to be here for Christmas. And we have kind of these numeric goals of how many people are coming. And you're like, why are we worried about that? Aren't we just worried that people know about Jesus? We're worried about that because every number is a person, and every person has a story, and every story matters to God. And we are trying to figure out these numbers and trying to figure out how many. We want to get the most amount of people in here to be able to hear about the gospel because we want to go. Because today there's 14,000 people in Mattoon that are not in a church. 14,000. Charleston today, there's 13,000 people sitting at home today not connected with the church. 13,000 people probably don't know God. That's 27,000 people within a 10-mile drive of right here that don't know Jesus. So yeah, we're all about numbers. We're all about trying to figure out how can we reach these 27,000 people so that they can know God in their life. I like what this pastor says in Alabama about this. He goes, as long as there is a heaven and there's a hell, growth is not an option. You're not growing in order to be larger. You're growing because heaven and hell are realities. That's why the Great Commission is so important to us. He's not trying to build a larger institution, not trying to build a larger church on earth. He's trying to rescue people for eternity's sake. And so that's why we care about numbers. Like we want to get as many people as possible to be able to hear this gospel because there's a reality of heaven and hell, because those are real places. It's our mandate, and Jesus gives us clear instructions. Here at the Fields Church, we are a church that is not for church people, right? We love church people that come, but it's not just a church for us because we're on a mission. We're on a mission to go to be able to tell people that have never known him before. Because everybody is in two places on this earth. One, they have found God, they know God, or two, they're trying to figure out who God is. And so everybody is there. They know God or they don't know God. And so our job here is to help people to know God. Because what happens is anytime you lose anything of value, you never take inventory of what you already have. And so we're really concerned about going Because we're not concerned about what we have. We're not concerned about the 786 people that were here 2 weeks ago. We're concerned about the 14,000 people, the 27,000 people in the area that weren't here, the 27,000 people that didn't hear the message. When I was a kid, I was probably 3 or 4 years old, and I've got 2 brothers, and I'm the middle child. And so we were at a department store, and my dad loses me in the department store. So you can imagine Evan at 4 years old of what I was like. And so somehow through the clothes, he loses me. 2 or 3 later, he comes to my mom and says, hey, like I lost Evan. I don't know where Evan's at. And she's like, how did you just lose him? He goes, I don't know. I was looking at something. I turn around and he's gone. And so if you've ever lost a kid, as a parent, like it's like code red, and you're freaking out, right? It's a freak out mode, and you're looking all over the place. And so I don't know if it's 5, 6 minutes, whatever it is. Every minute equals an hour to what it feels like to you, right? So they're searching all over the place, and they found me. I don't know if we were at a Walmart or what, but they found me in the middle of the next to the fish aquarium, just staring at the fish. And so what happens is, it wasn't my dad in that moment didn't say, you know what, it's okay. We've got 2 out of 3 sons still. 66% in a lot of things in this world is not bad, right? If you hit the lottery 66% of the time, that's a great, or you hit the baseball 66% of the time, right? So if I lost my keys, I don't say, no, it's okay because I still got my wallet, I still got my phone, I don't need my keys, right? No, because you're distracted by the things that are lost. Look at this. God is distracted by what is lost. Yes, He loved our worship today. He loved you pouring out your heart to Him, and He was paying attention to you, and He knows every hair on your head. But guess what? He was distracted. By what? He's distracted by that was lost. He was distracted by the 14,000, the 13,000 in Charleston people that don't know Him. He was distracted. He loves the church, but He's distracted. He loves the 99 worshipers, but He's distracted by the one. And that's why we exist as a church here at the Fields. Look at this in 2 Corinthians. It says, so we are Christ ambassadors. So He is sending us. God is making His appeal to this world through us. This is how He is communicating His love. Jesus, that's how people see Jesus, is through us. He reveals Himself through us. There is no plan B. It's us. And so our job is to figure out a way that we can reveal Jesus to people through us in the way that we talk, in the way that we live. And what we have to be cautious of, there's 2 extremes. One is that we act like the world and we do everything that the world does, and we dress like the world and we say the things the world does, and we wear what the world wears, and we purchase what the world purchases, and we listen to what the world listens to. And we just look like culture, and that's one extreme that we could go to. But look at this, is you can't make a difference unless you are different. So there is a sense like we have to be different, and we can't compromise. And the other extreme is if we're not like the world, is the other side we fall into is that we're rude and we're unattractive. Is that we're the one that we are the preacher on the corner, and we're rude and unattractive, and we're not able to influence people. So there's kind of 2 sides that we have to try to figure out where we land. Either we compromise and we're like the word, or we're so rude that nobody wants to listen to us. I like what Colossians says. Colossians 4:5 says, so live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. I like that. Let's be gracious and attractive. Don't be loud, be wise. Don't be silent, be wise. The goal in our conversations with people isn't to be right, it's to be effective. So don't be right, because you can win the argument and lose the war. 1 Peter 3:15 says it this way. Instead, you must worship Christ as the Lord of your life. And if someone asks you about your hope, as a believer, always be ready to explain it. Be ready. So if somebody asks, why do you go to the Fields on Sunday? Why do you go to church? Why do you get involved? Why do you wear the same shirt every single week? Right? Why do you go to a group? Why do you go on Sunday and then you're in a group and you go to somebody's house? Why is it? Have an answer. And so real quick, I want to fire off 5 or 6 ways of how you can go. So what does it look like to go. And there's different options. And today, your assignment is this. I challenge you to do this. When you walk out, say, you know what? I'm going to grab one of these and I'm going to do one of these things this week. The first one is to pray for people. That's how you can go. Pray for people. Drive around your neighborhood. Pray for the houses. Learn their names. Just pray for people. Pray for missionaries. You can email us and we'll give you all our missionaries list. And you can pray for their names. The next one is this, is to be generous. Your giving makes a difference. Be generous. Be generous. Every dollar that you give here to the Fields Church, man, we're helping make an impact for our neighbors, for our neighbors here at the Fields Church, making sure we have great kids' men's, making sure we have a great facility. We're impacting the communities. We're impacting the world. We've got global missions partners around the world. So be generous is one way that you can go. Another way is this, go. Go yourself. Go on missions trips. We're going to Mexico next summer. Go. We're trying to figure out another trip in 2020. Go. Go on some kind of trip. We do a weekend in June on Saturday called Serve, where we go out and serve our entire communities. Man, be a part of that. Go. Figure out how you can serve. The next one is this, is to connect with people. Have a connection with people. Connect, don't correct. Right? We don't have to correct people. Jesus never told us, and we never read in the Bible that he wants us to go out to people that aren't like us and to correct them. That's not in there. I like this statement. As people don't care what you know, they want to know that you care. Care about people. Connect with people. Love on people. That's how you can do it, is love your city, love your community, love your neighborhood, that they're like, wow, I got to figure out why that person cares so much. Add value to people. Years ago, when Katie and I were youth pastors, I remember there was this high school girl that came into, we had a service for, or I think we had a small group for high schoolers, and this girl came in, and I know she didn't want to be there because she told me she didn't want to be there. And so she sits down in this group, and her parents made her come, and she started coming a couple weeks because her parents made her come, and there was one time, or 2 or 3 times in a row, she didn't come. And so what I did was just threw out my thought of any time I didn't see anybody for a couple weeks, I would just send them a handwritten note. Hey, we missed you. I would say the same thing in all of them. Hey, we missed you so much this weekend. We hope to see you next week. I hope you have a great week. We care about you. That's it. And we sent out thousands and thousands of these over the years. And so this one landed up on this girl's kitchen table on a Friday, and that Friday night, she was in high school and had went out with her friends, and her friends were sitting around an apartment, and they were smoking weed, and they were having a conversation about, man, you know what, I don't understand life, and I just want to get rid of life, and what if we just ended our life? And so they walked away from that conversation on this Friday night at a party saying, you know what, let's just kind of end it, and we'll figure out how to end our lives. She goes home. Her mom was waiting for her. She got home late. Her mom was waiting for her and said, hey, there was this card that came for you. And so she opens up the card, and it just says, hey, we missed you the last couple weeks. We hope to see you. We care about you. And she's like, wow. Next day, she comes to Sunday morning to church. At the end of the message, she comes up and says, hey, I want to change my life and hand my life over to Jesus. I want to believe. I want to believe. And so there was nothing special in that card. Like, I had written that card thousands of times, the same verbiage probably. But now she's a missionary helping college students with Chi Alpha in Indiana, all because why? Somebody added value. Somebody said they cared. They cared about her. All it was this card with 20 words on it. Guess what? Never evaluate because you don't know what is happening and what God is doing in the hearts of people. Try to find a way to add value. And the next one is this. Is to share my story with people. Figure out how to share your story. It could be 2 minutes long. Figure out how to share your story. I think of it this way. Think of a courtroom and the different people in the courtroom. So you've got the judge. Well, we're not the judge. That's not our role. You got the prosecutor. We're not the prosecutor. You got the defender. We're not supposed to be defending anybody. And then the next one, you've got a witness. So what's the job of a witness? Well, the job of a witness is simple. It's to tell their side of the story. That's it. Like, they're not convincing anybody. All the attorney's saying, hey, so what did you see? What did you experience? And then they're sharing their story. And that's what our job is. Think of that mind frame as our job is just to tell our story. We're not convincing anybody. Whatever they do with the story in the courtroom is what they do with the story. Our job is just to tell the story. So what I want to challenge you is to come up with your story. Think of your 2-minute story. And that's the story that you share with people when you feel like it is the best time. And so my 2-minute story is this. It's like when we were kids, we grew up and we went to church. And I remember getting baptized in 6th grade. And I actually was baptized before I believed. And so I really didn't have any belief. I just went because we went. And then in high school, my parents were like, hey, you guys can make a decision if you want to go to church or not. And I said, no way, I don't want to go. And so I kind of just did what I did and did what most junior and seniors in high schools kids did when they don't go to church. And I kind of did those things, and I hung out with those. And I just kind of felt like there's this kind of this shame and this guilt inside of my life. And I felt me like having a far and far distance in a relationship with God, and I had no relationship with God. And there was this girl at school that invited me and said, hey, you know what, would you come to my church? And so I thought the girl was cute, and so I said yes. So I end up in this room with 20 high school students and somebody standing on stage, and I don't know what he spoke that day, but all at the end of the message, I just remember him saying, hey, is there anybody in here that wants to know God? And my heart was beating, and I uncrossed my arms, and I stood up, and I walked down the front, and I said, yes, I do. I don't even know what it means, but I know I need something. And so from that day forward, it took years and years, and even now, like I'm peeling away and throwing stuff and handing stuff away and changing things in my life. And that's my story. And so that's what you're trying to figure out. It's like, how can I shape this into I can share my story in the elevator with somebody? And so share your story. The next one is this. It's invite them to a place where they can experience God. We want them to come to a place of where they can meet God face to face. And the church is a great example of that. And so you can bring them here. One way to go, invite them here. You can invite them to church. And so what we do strategically all throughout the years, these series that we do, like Forged, some of them are for your friends that we're going to say, hey, go invite your friends. Other ones we're not going to put so heavy on because the topics that we're talking about may not be engaged so much for your friends. And so we're going to have different ones, and we're going to say, hey, this is a great series. Squeezed, great series, because we're going to be talking about finances, families, kids, time, scheduling. That's perfect. Great opportunity. And so what your job is to get them here. And what our job is to make sure that we present the gospel in a clear, understanding way. So one of the ways that you can go is invite them to an experience that they can meet God face to face. And so imagine if each one of us in this room, we proclaimed. We were the watchmen. And I want to challenge you one of these ways this week to do. Whether it's you giving and being generously, whether it's you praying for your neighborhood, whether it's you sharing your story, whether it's you inviting somebody, figure out, God, what is it the one way that you want me to proclaim this week? That you can run throughout the town saying, you know what, hey, this is the good news. Figure out what is that one way. And could you imagine all of us in this church today if we did that? If we took this week and we proclaimed one way? Could you imagine that it begins to kind of stir and we begin to do it every week? Could you imagine how it would change our church? Like we'd have to get more seats because more people would be coming. That number of the 14,000 in Mattoon and the 13,000 in Charleston would begin to lower. Why? Because we would be distracted by the things that are lost. And it would change our city. And then it begin to change our country. And it could change our world if churches all around the world began to be distracted by the things that were lost, and we went. So figure out today, what is that for you? How is one way that you can go? Early in the beginning of the message, we had talked about having the moment to believe. And we explained about how Jesus died on the cross for our sins, and he's saying you can have this free gift of salvation. And today, if you say, you know what, Evan, I want to take that step just like you took that step when you were in high school. And I want today to be the day that I know him. I'm going to pray, and I just invite you to pray also right where you are, to invite him into your life, to say, Jesus, I believe in you, and I want to follow after you. Let's pray. God, we thank you for the miracle that you have done on the cross. And today I believe that you died for me, that I chose to do things on my own, that I decided to live by my own selfish actions and desires. And I believe that you died on the cross for me. And today I want to receive that free gift that you have for me. I want to believe. I want to follow. I want to know you. Come into my life. In your name, amen. let's go ahead and stand up and sing one last song together.